play?
Yeah, my name's Simon Gabion Sheehans. I play rugby. I'm biracial. My dad's Pākehā and my mum's Filipino. So I do classify myself as a Kiwi because I was born and raised here, but I also consider myself to be Filipino as well. And I was lucky enough to, or I have been lucky enough to play rugby for the Philippines.
The sport you play?
I still play competitively to some degree. Club rugby in New Zealand, and when the opportunity comes, playing for the Philippines. I've only played 4 games for the Philippines over 2 years, but that's because we don't actually play that many games compared to, say, the All Blacks. I've been playing for the past 18 years. I'm a high school teacher as well, and through that I coach too. So I coach the second 15. Well, I was assistant coach with the second 15 at Rangitoto College this year. Up in New Zealand, rugby is the national sport. So if you're a young person in New Zealand, especially a young boy, you're going to be exposed to rugby at some point or another. So I watched a bit of rugby with Dad. I was interested in it, and I thought I'd give it a go. So Dad was all for it. Mum was a bit hesitant. She thought I'd get hurt, but she came to a few games and realised how much I enjoyed it and came to terms with it. I think she still, despite me being almost 30, I think she still finds it quite difficult to watch me play because she always thinks that her baby boy's going to get hurt. It's there's competition, of course. It's a competitive sport, it's a physical sport, but it's also community as well. I think through playing rugby, I've met a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. I think that's good for anyone. I think it's a terrible thing to sort of contain yourself within a bubble. I think it's really healthy to go out and meet a lot of people, and so there's a definite social aspect, and then there's also the aspect of improving yourself. And one thing you learn through playing a sport like rugby is that there's always ways that you can improve, whether it's getting fitter, getting faster, more skillful, or just becoming a better team member. There's a lot of ways that a sport can enable you to improve yourself. The Philippine national team, I forget how many years they've been active, hasn't been very long if you compare them to, say, the All Blacks. So the All Blacks have been around for, I think, almost over 100 years. I think the Philippines have been playing international rugby for about, I want to say, just under 20. So how did I get picked up? I was contacted when I was, I believe, 19 through social media. I can't remember what form of social media, whatever it was, about how many years ago. And so someone got in contact with me. They said, "Oh, okay, put your name in a database." So I did. And then about 7 or 8 years later, because they had a change in administration, someone got in contact with me. They saw that they had someone of Filipino heritage playing rugby in the Philippines, so they got in contact. We started an email chat, and they sort of, from that chat and seeing how many years experience I have and where I've played rugby during my time, they decided that they would give me a go. So I was invited to the training camp the next year, and from that training camp then selected into the national team, and that same year I made my debut for the Philippines.
Awesome.
Super special. My debut for the Philippines was awesome. Awesome in that I got to debut for the Philippines in the Philippines. We played a 2-test series against Singapore, and what was particularly special was not just having my mum there, so she of course was going, "Oh my God, he's going to get hurt," but I also had my grandma there, and she was going, "Oh my God, he's going to get hurt." But my other extended family, and for anyone who's met a Filipino before, you know that extended families are very important to us. And for me to have my whole Filipino extended family there for their first real rugby experience, because rugby is a very minor sport in the Philippines. Majority of the players who play for the Philippines are like me. They are biracial, half Filipinos, who have grown up in rugby playing country. So a couple of Kiwi Filipinos like myself, but mostly Australian Filipinos and British Filipinos. But yeah, just having the family there. What was really special, there was a really tight game against Singapore, and we didn't really consolidate the win until about the final 5 minutes. So the final whistle was really, it was quite a relief, but it was also really cool because when the final whistle blew, I was about maybe 10 metres away from where my family were, and there's no like fence or anything. It's just like an average rugby ground, and so final whistle blew. It got straight away. Just went up to my grandma, my mum, hugged them, and we're all yelling because I can't remember how much we won by, but it wasn't much. It was always kind of challenging growing up, in New Zealand. We have a very multicultural society, so that was really good in that no matter what you looked like, what colour you were accepted. But always difficult sort of finding sort of myself as a Filipino. So for example, I don't speak Tagalog, I only speak a little bit of it. But through playing for the Philippines and being there more often, I definitely have it's allowed me to identify more as a Filipino. And I think that sort of again helped me become more comfortable with myself as an individual. So it's definitely the sort of sort of finding myself, if you want to call it that. Yeah,
with other experiences.
It's quite funny that something that is very quintessentially Kiwi in rugby, national sport, has actually allowed me to become, I feel, more like a Filipino through representing the Philippines. I think as a child I struggled a little bit with trying to find my sort of place within schools and within wider society, just because when I was growing up, Filipinos were still very much a minority in New Zealand. It's only been really in the past, I want to say 10-15 years, where we've seen a massive influx of Filipinos to New Zealand, and it's great, that's awesome. It's nice for me to be able to go to Pino Plus and Glenfield and Lincoln Road and have these places where I can easily access the food of my people, for example. But growing up, there definitely weren't that many of us around. We didn't have that, so we kind of had to find our own sort of place. And definitely at school, I felt that being one of my primary school, I think I was one of maybe about 3 or 4 kids out of the 500, 600 that were there that of Filipino heritage. So whilst that was cool to be unique, it was definitely, especially when you're younger, challenging to sort of find people to relate to, especially being biracial. There weren't that many biracial people at my school, definitely primary school, but high school, I think because it was much larger, there was a few more, but still very much a minority.
So when you were a kid, like growing up, when people asked you, "Oh, where are you from?" what would you say to them?
I was very confused. I didn't know what to say, and even to this day, I have to sort of take a step back and go, okay, what do I say? And I've sort of become more comfortable with saying Kiwi or Filipino heritage. When I was younger, I think I just said Filipino, and then of course that would confuse people. I guess it depended who I was talking to and how I felt on the day. But I've definitely sort of become more comfortable with calling myself a Kiwi and Kiwi Filipino at the age I am now. I think positive. It's definitely been a positive influence. Like in many Asian cultures, hard work is definitely something we value, and I think with the sport, it's really quite straightforward to see how hard work benefits you. So when my mum did come and watch my games, she would be brutally honest. She'd say things like, "You're not fit enough, you're too slow," and she'd say, "You need to work harder on that," and then she'd tell me, go run, and I go, "Okay, Mum, I'll go run." So I think it's definitely been a positive. It's tough. Proudest moment outside of sport. I mean, pretty typical response, I guess, would be graduation from university, having mum there, and also it kind of means a little extra to my mum's family. Dad's family obviously was pretty important as well, but for different reasons. For Mum's family, it sort of harkens back to, in the Philippines, the Philippines has a very high poverty rate. I can't give you the exact statistics, but I believe it's roughly 1/3 of the population live in pretty hardcore poverty. And it's pretty well known over there, if you want to get yourself out of poverty, you need to be educated. And so for them, getting a degree isn't just, oh yay, you've got a qualification, you can now get a job. It's being able to, well, enabling yourself to make something of yourself. So it's quite significant in that way. So I guess that was quite important. Seeing the look on Mum's face, you know, of course all the other parents looked pretty proud, but you know, she looked especially proud. Maybe even a couple of tears here and there. So when it came to deciding to go to university, I think my family always kind of steered me in that direction. So my dad was a factory worker, so I guess you would call that a blue-collar worker all his life. And you know, it's not easy being a factory worker. I did a bit of factory work in between university semesters and working 12-hour days in a hot factory. I mean, I take my hat off to those people that do it every day. It is such hard work, but the people that do it, they do it because they have to. So Mum always sort of thought, we don't want him going that way. If he has to, he has to. But we want to give him the opportunity to go to university, and you know, she very much drove me towards that, with Dad's support, of course. Dad would often say, don't end up in a factory, boy. But yeah, Mum definitely was a big driver towards that. Did I have a lot of choice? maybe a bit, but yeah, definitely university was I guess, the aim, and very much for the reasons I said previously. I'm a high school teacher. I work at Rangitoto College, and yeah, that's my job. I wanted a job where I got to work with people. I wanted a job where I wouldn't be confined to a desk, and you know, a job where I could sort of explore my own interests and passions. And I teach English and Media Studies, a couple of things I'm really interested in. So I get to do that every day. I get to work with people and quite closely, and yeah. And another thing that I get through working as a teacher is also exploring my love of sport and rugby, getting involved in that with coaching. So yeah, my job has only given me more opportunities with sport. I think when it came to deciding to become a teacher, I decided I want a job where I get to work with people and I get to, you know, have what I felt was a mostly positive influence on them. Of course, there are some days where you've got to give them a hard work, you've got to give them a detention or something, but in the end that is fairly positive, I hope. But yeah, just working with young people to sort of help guide them. You know, I'm sure we can all relate to how hard being a teenager is, and especially today. Being a teenager today is so tough. So much extra pressure and so much extra to worry about. But when I got into it, it was just very much with the idea of, you know, I get to teach the subject that I enjoy, something that I'm passionate about. I get to share that passion. Whether they enjoy it as much, we'll see. Hopefully, you know, a bit of my passion can rub off. But just getting that chance to work with these people that have, I guess, an unlimited amount of potential, perhaps. Definitely, it's just sort of letting kids find their potential, seeing their potential grow, and assisting them with that. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about them.
Okay.
So, it doesn't happen every day.
Yeah.
I think people often, the cliche is that with teaching is such a rewarding job, and it is, but the rewards don't come every day. Okay, you've got to work really hard for those rewards, and those rewards, you might have to work weeks, months, maybe even years for those rewards to come in. Especially my work as a dean, I think that's where I kind of see a lot of my work come to fruition. For example, I might have a student who in year 10 was absolute ratbag. very difficult, very disrespectful. But come end of year 11, they're improving. They're a nicer kid, still perhaps a bit of a rebel, but nice nonetheless. So that's an improvement. Maybe we get to the end of year 12 and they're an awesome kid. And they don't have to be the excellence level kid or anything like that, but they're doing a lot better than what we would have expected from back when they were in year 10. So something like that is extremely rewarding. And again, it's good to see that myself, but it's awesome for what it can do for that kid. Now that kid has so many more opportunities and can make a lot more of himself now, which is awesome. I mean, apart from the literal meaning of getting bigger, making gains, I think they call it. I think a lot of people sort of, when it comes to this idea of personal growth, I think it's sort of been pigeonholed into this sort of pseudo, I need to grow myself and all this, but the thing is, growing yourself, personal growth, whatever you want to call it, that's waking up every morning and going to work and doing something hard. That's perhaps trying something new that you wouldn't have done before. That's all, these things that we perhaps don't consider to be personal growth. That is all part of the puzzle. And I think people sort of need to pay more attention to that. These sort of challenges we face on a daily basis, and these challenges that we accept. The challenges that we didn't expect, for example. Something as simple as your mate, bringing it back to sports, your mate saying, oh, you want to come for a run or something, or you want to go play some touch. Yeah, that might at the moment just seem like a little touch game, but the fact that you're exposing yourself to something new, something different perhaps, that's personal growth. It comes back to, I can't remember the saying exactly, but this whole idea, if you remain the same, you're destined to fail, or you're destined, I think even the actual saying is you're destined for death, or something quite crude like that. But growth, improvement, it's an essential part of life. Times change, and you got to change with it. You got to improve yourself. If you don't, you risk being left behind, and that can apply to any context, whether it be work, sport, or just your personal life. That growth is necessary in order for you to better your life. I see that quite obviously at school. If a kid chooses not to grow, not to learn, then they get left behind. And thankfully, in my experience, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen every now and then, and it is quite a sad and frustrating thing to see. And of course, and then my job as a teacher is, what can I do to help with that? Because I don't want to see that. I don't want to see kids being left behind. I don't want to see kids not achieving their potential, because that's quite sad to see a kid that can be something, and you can see it in them. They have this ability. Perhaps they don't have the self-belief, so you need to help them with that. Help them with their self-esteem, their confidence, so they can actually make the most of that potential. And I guess my advice to anyone looking to become an educator of any sort, working with young people, even just people in general, is that it is tough. You come across a lot of challenges, and that's part of the beauty of the job as well. My 2 days at work are never the same. I always have a different challenge, a different person I need to interact with and help and work with. It can be very frustrating, and sometimes you will hit a wall and you go, I don't know what else more I can do. And in those moments, sometimes you have to remind yourself, well, you've fulfilled your part of the relationship. Perhaps it's time for the other person to fulfill theirs. You've given them the skills, you've given them the opportunities. I guess the cliche would be, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? And that can be very frustrating, but sometimes some kids, they take those opportunities right away. Some kids, it takes a while. And those kids that take a while, when they finally do get it, they finally do take those opportunities. That's when it's extremely rewarding. There's one thing that sort of encompasses both, and I've talked to a few people at Rangatoto about this, and it would be really cool to see more Asian people getting involved with rugby. I think that it's a sport that a lot of Asian people don't really think is for them, because they haven't grown up with it, they haven't been exposed to it. But I think there is a lot of opportunities for Asians in rugby. I'm sort of a good example of that. So in New Zealand, fairly average rugby player, if I'm being honest. But then we go to, if I go to a place like the Philippines, I have the opportunity to represent my country, and that's awesome. It'd be cool to see more people do that, more people with Asian heritage. It'd be cool if we could get some people going to represent Singapore and Korea. Obviously Japan's pretty strong anyway, but it'd be cool if we could get some New Zealand Japanese to go over there and play for Japan. And that's something that I'm hoping to do more at work, is try to get more Asian students playing rugby. That would be awesome to see. Easy one is that, so I made my debut for the Philippines at 28, and I sometimes kick myself thinking, man, if I had actually, because I kind of waited for the opportunity to come to me, I should have gone and found the opportunity myself. If I had done that, I probably would have more games for the Philippines. I probably would have, not trying to boast or anything, but I probably would have a lot more than 4 games. Yeah. So reason for that is that in New Zealand, I guess, when it comes to representing, especially a country, this is, the All Blacks are from here. You don't just call up Ian Foster and say, hey mate, I want to play on the weekend. But because rugby's still developing in the Philippines, there is an element of that. So I guess this advice also applies to any young person, especially of Asian heritage, who is wanting to sort of go further in their rugby, is go seek the opportunities themselves. If you're half Filipino like myself, half Singaporean, half Korean, or even, don't even have to be half, but go seek out the opportunities, get in touch with that, what would you call it, with the people in charge of those what was that word again? I forget. But get in touch with those countries and find those opportunities. We can redo that one if you want.
No, that's alright. I can just cut.
Cool.
Anything else you want to share?
No. Anything else you want to know?
Message for the young fellas.
Message for the young fellas: don't wait for opportunity to find you. You go find the opportunities. Especially if you're of Asian heritage, there are so many opportunities out there in rugby that you don't know about, and you guys all have Google. Yeah, don't be afraid of challenge. Don't be afraid of what's hard. I think one thing that I've definitely seen in my years working with young people is that we've sort of come into a place where we think we need to make things easier for kids, and I'm all for making things safe. I think that's where the confusion comes from. Safe and easier, 2 different things. I think we need to expose our kids to challenging situations, controlled challenges, and then let them sort of figure things out for themselves so they can grow their own confidence. And I think sport is a great way to have kids do that. Chuck them out on a field, they've got to make decisions like that. And kids losing a sports game, they can deal with that, and that will teach them so much about life. And winning as well, I guess, will teach them some stuff too. But overcoming adversity is something that you can expose children to with sports. And I think that if we can get more kids being exposed to that adversity, that's only going to create a society of more balanced and mentally stronger people. So play sport, everybody.